We like to think of evil as something loud, something that crashes into our lives like a force of nature, a monster that kicks down the door. But what if it's quieter than that? What if it's a guest? A guest we don't even realize we've invited in? That's the really unsettling truth we're going to explore. And this isn't just a history lesson. It's a look in the mirror. This quote, it gets right to the terrifying heart of it all, doesn't it? It was never really about one so-called madman. It was about the conditions, the psychological environment that allowed a person like that to thrive. It's about the slow, quiet trap of surrender, a trap that, believe it or not, exists in all of us, just waiting for the right key to turn the lock. For decades, researchers have been wrestling with this, trying to understand how something so monstrous could have happened. And the conclusion they reached is, frankly, chilling. The people who actually carried out these atrocities, the bureaucrats filing the paperwork, the soldiers following orders, the neighbors who looked the other way, they weren't born monsters. They were ordinary people, people like you and people like me. So how does that happen? How do normal, everyday people become complicit in unimaginable evil? To really get it, to understand how this mass manipulation took hold, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the ground itself, the fertile soil of fear and national humiliation where these toxic ideas were first planted. Because a truly new and dangerous ideology, it can't just take root in a healthy mind. No, it needs a wounded psyche to really flourish. The first major crack in the German national psyche came at the end of World War I. Think about it. For 4 long years, the people were told, we are winning, we are superior. And then, almost overnight, they'd lost. This creates a profound state of cognitive dissonance. It's a kind of mental whiplash. Imagine being told for months you're getting a huge promotion, and then you walk in one day and you're fired. Your brain just can't reconcile those two realities. It scrambles. It needs a story to make it make sense. And the story that rose up from that chaos was the stab in the back myth. It was an incredibly powerful and honestly, a very seductive lie. It whispered, "You didn't fail. Of course not. You were betrayed." See, this wasn't just some political slogan. It was a psychological bomb. It took that unbearable sting of humiliation and it transformed it into something else, into the righteous, focusing fire of hatred. But the trauma, it didn't stop with the war. The economic collapse of 1923 delivered a second, devastating blow. If the war shattered the nation's pride, hyperinflation, well, it shattered its sanity. The world simply stopped making any sense at all. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're almost impossible to comprehend. In the span of just a few months, the price of a single loaf of bread went from 250 marks to 200 billion. Try to imagine your life savings, your retirement fund, everything you worked for your entire life becoming completely worthless, not in a year, but overnight. That's what happened to an entire generation. The very foundations of their reality just crumbled to dust. And this wasn't just an economic crisis. It was a deep psychological one. It burned a primal fear of chaos into the minds of millions. And when people are that afraid, they become incredibly vulnerable. They become willing to trade away their freedom, their rights, anything, for a simple promise of stability, no matter what the cost. And that is exactly what happened next. So the stage was set. You had a nation that was deeply traumatized, and its people were absolutely desperate for a way out. This is where the Nazis stepped in. But they didn't offer a logical plan. They didn't offer a 5-point economic policy. They offered something much more powerful. They offered a completely new reality. And they built it, not with reason, but by essentially hacking the human brain.
This right here, this is the secret sauce of all propaganda. Our brains, well, they're wired to take shortcuts. They have to process the world. And one of the biggest shortcuts is something called the Illusory Truth Effect. It's why a catchy jingle gets stuck in your head. And it's why a lie, if you hear it enough times, starts to feel like the truth. The Nazis understood this instinctively. They didn't really try to convince people with facts and logic. They just repeated their core lies over and over and over again until they became part of the very air people breathe.
And this is where their strategy got truly, chillingly audacious. Hitler himself wrote that a big lie is far more believable than a small one. Why? Well, because a small lie is something we can all imagine telling. But a lie of this magnitude, a lie that blames an entire group of people for every single one of a nation's problems, It's just so outrageous, so beyond the pale, that the average person's mind struggles to believe anyone would have the nerve to just make it up. It's a kind of psychological judo move, using our own sense of reason against us. But this new reality wasn't just something you heard on the radio. No, it was something you felt in your bones. The Nuremberg rallies, these weren't political meetings. They were a full-on sensory assault. I want you to just imagine the roar of 100,000 people, a sea of banners as far as the eye can see, giant pillars of light reaching up into the night sky. It was all a spectacle, designed to overwhelm you, to dissolve your individual sense of self into something bigger, something more powerful. It was a drug, and it was intensely addictive. But perhaps the most insidious form of manipulation was also one of the most subtle, the mandatory Hitler salute. It seems like such a small thing, right? Just raising your arm. But it was a brilliant piece of psychological engineering. Every single time you performed that act, dozens of times a day, you were physically performing an act of loyalty. And if, in your heart, you didn't believe in what you were doing, well, that creates a painful conflict in your mind. And the easiest way for the brain to resolve that conflict? It's not to stop doing the action, it's to change the belief. Your own body was training your mind to obey. So we see the Nazis had built this whole new reality, and they had conditioned people physically and mentally to accept it. But that's not the end of the story, is it? The next crucial step was to get people to not just accept this reality, but to actively participate in it, to become a part of the machine. So how do you do that? How do you turn ordinary people into instruments of cruelty? You know, it's so easy for us to sit here now, in the safety of the present, and to judge, to say what we would or wouldn't have done. But what if you were really there? What would you have actually done? Let's try to imagine it. The year is 1933. You're a clerk working at a desk in Berlin. It's not some dramatic Hollywood scene. There's no shouting, no violence, just a quiet office and a man in a brown uniform. He's rounding up your Jewish colleagues, men you've known for years, had lunch with, men of respect and standing. Then he turns to you. He looks you in the eye and asks, "Are you Aryan?" And in that single silent moment, your entire world shrinks down to one word. Yes. You say it. And just like that, you're safe. The man moves on. In that moment, Hafner wrote later, he realized something absolutely terrifying. He hadn't been asked to do something monstrous. He wasn't asked to hurt anyone. He was just asked to make one small choice, a tiny, seemingly insignificant compromise. But in that one small act of self-preservation, everything was lost. This is what psychologists now call moral drift. It's the slow, steady, almost imperceptible erosion of your own integrity. It's like a path that starts out wide and easy, but with every step it gradually narrows, until one day you look down and realize you're walking on the edge of a cliff. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens one small compromise at a time. A joke you don't challenge, a form you sign without really reading it, a moment of silence when you know you should have spoken up. Each step seems so small, so insignificant, but together they lead to absolute disaster. This brings us to another really key psychological principle, the immense power of roles. When we're given a job to do, a uniform to wear, our personal sense of responsibility can just start to fade away. We stop asking the question, is this the right thing to do? And we start asking, am I doing my job correctly? The moral part of our brain essentially gets outsourced to the system, to the people giving the orders. We become a cog in a much larger machine. And this right here is the final crucial piece of the puzzle, normalization. When something horrific becomes normal, it stops being shocking. It just becomes the way things are. And once that happens, any act of resistance starts to feel like an extreme act. It feels dramatic and dangerous. It's so much easier and so much safer to just go along with the crowd. Our deep, deep-seated human fear of being an outcast, it's one of the most powerful tools of manipulation there is. It can make us do things we never, ever thought we were capable of. Now, it's really tempting to think of all this as a story about the past, right? About a different time, a different country, a different people. But it's not. It's a story about us. Because the psychological vulnerabilities, the little glitches in our mental software that were exploited back then, they are still a part of our programming today. Our brains have not changed. So the real question is, how are we vulnerable now? This is the recipe. It's not a secret. It's a formula that has been used time and time again throughout history. You start with fear, a population that's afraid. Then you make everything about identity, about us versus them. You stir in a heavy dose of obedience to authority, and then you let it all simmer until everyone is too tired, too overwhelmed, too exhausted to care anymore. The result is indifference, and that right there is the most dangerous ingredient of all. And look, we don't have to guess about this. This has been proven over and over again in psychology labs. You've probably heard of the famous Milgram experiment, where ordinary people, just like us, were willing to deliver what they thought were incredibly painful electric shocks to another person, simply because a man in a lab coat told them it was their duty. This isn't a German defect, it's a human one. It is a latent potential that lies dormant inside all of us. The hardware in our brains, it hasn't changed a bit. So, we come to the end. And the final question isn't really about them back then. It's about us, right now. In a world that's more connected, more chaotic, more overwhelming than ever before, what's your price? At what point do you trade your own critical thinking for a feeling of safety? At what point do you trade your empathy for a feeling of belonging? At what price would you sell your own reality?